Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to the end of last year, 2019, to take a look at Chris Cain, and he's going to be playing some classic blues. We're also going to be analysing the topic of playing the guitar and looking whilst you're playing, and then playing without looking, because some players look at the guitar a lot and some players don't. So I'm going to be explaining that to you guys so that you can understand it a little bit more. And also, Chris is a great example of someone who does play and not look at the guitar for long periods. But let's get into this video. Let's get Chris and the band up on screen and see how he gets on.
Just waiting for you. I've got a whole lot of loving, baby, just waiting for you. Oh, the way I could love you, baby, lot of fun you could love me too. Well, you're so good looking, baby, now you build up from the ground. So good looking, baby, like you build up from it. Every time I see you, baby, love comes tumbling down. Come here, guitar.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this video is going to be in the description below, so you guys can head over there to watch it the whole way through. As you can see, it is the full gig, so it'll be 2 hours worth, just over. And picking Chris to look at to describe the difference between looking and playing and then not looking is probably a bad person to pick. He's great at it, but because his playing is so good, I just want to talk about the control, the dynamics, the vibrato here, talk about a dynamic breakdown that we have, bringing everything down. The whole band is so on it, just tickling the drum kit in the background and rolling off so much of that sound on the volume on the guitar to give such a tiny tone that's going on, but then he can open it up, turn it up to 10 on the guitar, and he's got that overdriving gain on there as well. So he's got a great tone here. The other thing is the dynamics in the playing, the way that Chris brings down the attack on his pick. He's not picking the strings really violently here, he's just caressing them because He's got such a clean tone, and because of the feel. There are so many things that I could focus on with Chris. You can hear that jazz influence in there as well, in and around the minor pentatonic shapes and the blues scale. He'll just throw a little bit of chromaticism in there. Some of the lines here are so cool, but we are going to be focusing on looking and not looking at the guitar. And this is something that you can look at when Chris is playing, the little reference points that he always gives himself before he then gets into a particular lead phrase that he might be playing, and then he'll not look at the guitar once he's got his reference point. So I've seen it pop up in a lot of comment sections underneath guitar videos, and a lot of the guitarists that don't look at the fretboard when they're playing, and people that don't play the guitar seem to attribute some kind of extra difficulty not looking at the fretboard when you're playing. Whereas a lot of players out there will know that if you know your shapes and if you're comfortable on the fretboard, it's not difficult to not look at the fretboard when you're playing, and it certainly isn't something that makes one player better than another because they don't look, so therefore they must be better. It's just a myth, I think, that people that don't play don't necessarily understand that it's one and the same once you reach a particular level. I think the best example of this would be to say that you go to a gig and you watch a guy playing the guitar and it's out of tune, it's bad sounding, he's not in the right place on the guitar, and he doesn't have great technique, but he never looks at his guitar, and the crowd go crazy because he never looked, so how good is he? And then you might get the next guitarist who gets up on stage and he starts playing and he's looking at the fretboard, and everything he does is great technique, and he's in key, and he's playing some great lines, he's got so many stylistic options he can go to, but then the crowd boo because he was looking. You never ever get that, and that's one of those things that I guess explains why looking and then not looking doesn't really matter, because it's all about the final product. Music is about the sound and the way you can get the instrument to connect with an audience and how you can get the guitar to sing as an instrument. Breaking it down into its fundamental components, not looking at the fretboard of the guitar, a lot of people that don't play won't understand how it's done, but you can do this at home. If you've got your phone in your pocket, without looking at your phone, get it out of your pocket and try and find where the button is to get it out of sleep mode, or try and find where the volume buttons are on the phone without looking at it. And I'm sure all of you, if you are doing this now, can get your phone out of your pocket, and just by feeling it, you know whether it's upside down and which way it should be facing, and where the button is to unlock it, where the volume buttons are. You know all of this, but you're not looking at the thing that you're holding. You're using your sense of touch, and just through experience and muscle memory, you know exactly where these buttons are. Exactly the same principle with anybody that's a gamer and will have a control pad. On a PlayStation or Xbox, there'll be a particular button, say for example on a PlayStation, the circle button. When it says that on the screen, you don't have to look at the controller to see where the circle button is to then press it. You know, because you've been playing for so long. Obviously, when you first start playing a game, you have to learn the control pad, but once it's there, you don't have to be told where the button is, you just press it, and then the triangle button comes up, you'll press it. R1, you'll press it. R2, you'll press it. It's automatic, it's subconscious, because you're familiar with where it is. It's exactly the same thing on the guitar. You might say that playing a game and using a controller is different to playing a guitar, but not really. If you spend ages playing a game, you know the control pad inside out. If you spend ages playing the guitar, you know the guitar inside out. You know the shape of it, the dimensions of it. On a control pad, it's designed in such a way to give you easy access to all of the buttons. That's the point. So, relating that to the guitar, what we have when we play the guitar are scales or shapes. A particular scale will be a particular shape. It's exactly the same as like holding a control pad. It's always going to be the same shape every time you go to the guitar. So after a while, you don't need to look at it anymore because you know it's not going to change. The only thing that's ever going to change where notes are on the guitar is when you start tuning your guitar differently. An example for people that might not have a phone, people that don't play the guitar, and people that might not play games. Have a look around the room that you're sat in at the moment and just scan around, see where the door is, and imagine that in a few seconds' time, the room is going to be pitch black. and you've got to find the door. So you'll scan the room, you'll see where everything is, and as soon as it goes pitch black, you now have to find the door. You'll stand up and you'll pretty much roughly be able to get there, but you'll feel your way around the room to make sure you're getting to the door. And people will say, well, how did you know where the door was? Because it was pitch black and you weren't looking. You couldn't see where the door was because you've already visualized the room. It's exactly the same thing on the guitar. Once you know your shapes, you've got a lay of the land. You know where the notes are. Even if somebody turns out the light, if you've got a reference point, i.e. where you're sat now in your room, you've got a reference point to where the door is in relation to where you are. So once you have that on the guitar, it's exactly the same. This example is getting a bit long-winded, but it is all relevant because some people will say, if the lights went out, I would use my arms to find where the door was and where all the bits of furniture are that you're going to be falling over. Exactly the same with the guitar. When the lights go out, you're using your hand to feel where you are on the neck of the guitar. And when you slide, you can feel frets with your fingers. It'll get to the point where you don't have to rely on feeling the frets because your muscle memory will store the distance between one fret and another fret. So I'm busting out the Strat just to give you an example of having a reference point. And this is something you'll always see guitar players doing, just quickly looking down at the guitar to get their reference point in exactly the same way as you use your reference point in a room to find where the door is when it's suddenly gone dark. We've got this same shape. Pentatonic shape 1 is what I'm going to show you, the same key that Chris is playing in D minor, just to keep it a little bit consistent throughout the video. But if I play through the whole shape, that's pentatonic shape 1 in D minor, and you can see that my first finger throughout that whole scale didn't move. It stuck on the same fret, the 10th fret here. So it means that I don't have to move anywhere, I just have to remember which finger to put down. When I say which finger to put down, when you first learn this scale, generally you're going to be using your little finger to play a note that is 3 frets above the first finger. So that's what you have on the high E string and the B string. And then the shape is then just 2 frets difference. So now I'm going to use my 3rd finger down to the 1st finger, 3rd finger again, 3rd finger again, and now little finger again, down to 1st finger. So I've gone through that whole shape. I haven't had to look because I know that it's just going to be these fingers. And I can work my way up and down that shape. The muscle memory is going to keep it consistent, but also I'm not having to move anywhere. So it means that all of the lines I can start playing lots of lines because I've got a reference point. I know where all of these notes are. So once you've got that reference point, you probably want to start with a pentatonic shape 1 for your lead playing, just to get used to the fingering, but also that first finger having the reference point of not moving. And then once you've got used to that, it's then a case of just adapting it and just making it slightly larger. So if I'm taking that same shape, I've now gone further down, and if I want to, I can go even higher. And now I'm working my way up and down a shape that I already know in my head. It's just putting down the right fingers at the right time. Something that you might have noticed me do there was the 2 fret slide down and the 2 fret slide up. That kind of thing. So the muscle memory of my hand knows that distance. Like I said, it's never going to change. Once you've played for a long time and you keep repeating these movements, your muscle memory remembers it in exactly the same way that when you got your phone out of your pocket, you started to automatically go to where you unlock your phone. The muscle memory knows where that button is, so it automatically starts going there. So I've played through minor pentatonic shape 1. I've also played through a version of the shape that's a little bit more convenient for stylistic playing. which also gives me access to 3 octaves of notes if I want them. But then also, once you've played through that shape, it's always going to be the same. And once you get to the top of that shape, you can then start moving into the extended pentatonic shape. To give an example of playing through that pentatonic shape into another pentatonic shape without looking, you'd have this. Now here, these slides, again, it's muscle memory, my hand knows how far to slide up. But then once I'm here, I can go all the way down to the bottom again if I want to, and all of those notes that I played higher up the guitar is just another shape. It's just the extended shape in exactly the same way that I know where all the notes are in the first shape, I know it in the second shape. So generally you'll find that players don't spend the whole gig never looking at their guitar, and then when they pick up the guitar, they don't look at it. They have a little look down for a reference point, because once you've got that, then you know where you are on the guitar, you know where you are in the room, going back to the example earlier. So you have a quick look down to get your first finger in place for pentatonic shape 1 on that 10th fret for D minor, and all of this is now in relation to your reference point, so you know exactly where you're going all the time. You want to be at the point where you know pentatonic shape 1 inside out, so that once you've got your reference point and you look at where you want to start playing, you then don't have to look, and you nail each fretting position, and you can do bends, and all of these stylistic techniques that you have, you can nail. But then you also want to have one shape able to lead into the next. So as an example of that, if I go to E minor, everyone, well, I say everyone, if you do play the guitar will know pentatonic shape 1 in E minor, which would be down there, and then moving it up into the extended shape, and then into shape 1 again. And then if you wanted to, and then you'd go into the extended shape again, and what you'll find sometimes when you're playing the guitar and not looking, you'll run out of frets on your guitar because you're not looking, so you're not taking in the fretted information, you're taking in the musical information. So you might go and run out of space, but you know where the shape would have gone if you had enough frets. Just to quickly throw in about tapping, because whenever you watch a guitarist, acoustic or electric, tapping with the right hand on the fretboard, they're always going to be looking because they want to make sure that they tap in the right place. Obviously, if you miss it, it's going to be a disaster and it's not worth the risk. The reason it's more difficult is because the right hand is always in its picking position down here. Whereas when you want to tap in a note, you have to move your right hand away from the strumming and the picking position here to wherever the note is. And sometimes, especially if you're tapping further down the guitar, it's too wide of a distance for that muscle memory to remember accurately. So somebody might be playing in their standard shape, not looking at the fretboard, but as soon as they want to tap in a note, they have a little look down for a point of reference and make sure that they tap it in with that right hand. And I haven't got the best tone here, it's a bit clean for tapping, but the thing is about that reference point is once you're there, it's going to be exactly the same principle as the left hand. So I can now not look, and the right hand is still doing it correctly because it's the same muscle memory that I used when I was looking. But hopefully this video hasn't gone on for too long and it's made it a little bit easier to understand how players play without looking at the fretboard. And unfortunately, we haven't really looked at much of Chris's playing, but when you're looking at somebody at Chris's level of playing, there are so many shapes that Chris is blending together, like I said, with that jazz influence and the chromaticism of throwing in so many more notes than you normally would in a minor pentatonic shape. It is so impressive to watch because he's all over it, but it's exactly the same principle. It's all based on that foundation of knowing a shape, knowing a scale, and keeping it consistent the whole time with practice so that eventually you don't have to look anymore and muscle memory takes over. And with the top players, when they're not looking at the guitar, they are just being creative because they've got that visual roadmap in their head and they can go wherever they want to because all of the notes are second nature. They know all the shapes. So now it's just how do you want to use it and which stylizations they choose with vibrato, slides, you name it, in order to make it sound unique. And they will always use those techniques that they like themselves so that it sounds like they're playing when they play. That's the other thing, that everybody's got the same notes on the guitar to work with, is how you put your own personality into it. In a nutshell, looking at the fretboard, not looking at the fretboard, it doesn't really matter. It's all about the sound that's being produced and whether people like listening to your playing. And I wouldn't get hung up on not looking at the guitar, but if it's something that you really want to learn how to do, it is just repetition of shapes and just practicing moving through the shapes and looking at the guitar the whole time so your muscle memory never stores wrong information. Because if you slide and you miss the slide that you were aiming for, say you were going for a 2-fret slide and you accidentally went 3 frets, your muscle memory doesn't distinguish between wrong and right, only what is repeated the most times. So make sure you consistently repeat the slide correctly time after time after time after time. And that's what fast playing is all about as well. You play it really slowly for ages so that your muscle memory never does it wrong, and then you slightly speed it up. And that gradual process of increasing your speed is just the muscle memory getting better at repeating the correct movement. But as I said, the link to this performance is going to be in the description below, so you guys can go there to check out more of Chris's playing. I do think it's sometimes good now and again to do a video like this to address a question that I've seen a lot, not only on this channel and in my teaching, but also on other channels, so that people hopefully can understand it a little bit more. Thank you guys for suggesting this video for me to take a look at in the first place. It just so happens that Chris is a great example of this topic that I've been talking about. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!